Do you know that a starfish can reproduce by detaching a limb, and then the detached limb regrows into a fully formed starfish? This process is known as asexual reproduction, which we will discuss in detail in this video. But before that, what is reproduction? Reproduction is a biological process by which an organism produces a new organism of its own kind. Whether we are talking about a simple microorganism or a complex human being, every organism has the ability to reproduce and give rise to new life. And each species can only produce individuals of its own kind. Elephants give birth to elephants, dogs give birth to puppies, and humans give birth to other humans. Now, have you ever thought about how you got your traits from your parents, like your eye color or nose shape? Well, it's all because of a special molecule called DNA that's found in our cells. In our cells, DNA is stored in chromosomes inside the nucleus. This DNA contains all the information that determines how our body will look and function. When cells divide during reproduction, the DNA has to be copied and divided too. This is done by making a copy of itself. But will the two new cells be exactly the same? It depends on how accurately the DNA was copied. Sometimes, there are slight variations in the copying process, which leads to the DNA copies being similar but not identical to the original DNA. This means that the new cells are similar to each other, but have few differences. So, when we inherit traits from our parents, it's because we receive a mix of their DNA copies. Some of the features we inherit may be exactly the same as our parents, while others may have some variations. This is why siblings can have some similar traits, but also some differences. DNA copying is a complex process, and variations are normal, which adds to the diversity and uniqueness of individuals. And that's not all. This variation is important for organisms to survive over time. Let's try to understand it with the help of an example. Let's consider a population of bacteria living in temperate waters. If the temperature of the water were to increase due to global warming, most of these bacteria would die because they are not adapted to survive in warmer temperatures. However, if there were some bacteria that had variations that made them resistant to heat, they would survive and continue to grow. This shows that variations are essential for the survival of a species when the environment changes. If there were no variations in the population, the entire species could be wiped out. Therefore, variations provide the necessary genetic diversity that can help a species adapt and survive in a changing environment. Now let's begin with the main topic of this video, that is, reproduction. There are two main types of reproduction, sexual and asexual. Asexual reproduction involves only one parent and their offspring are genetically identical to the parent. Sexual reproduction involves two parents and their offspring inherit traits from both parents. In this video we will discuss the various types of asexual reproduction, mainly fission, fragmentation, regeneration, budding, vegetative propagation, spore formation. Let's begin with fission. Unicellular organisms, which are made up of just one cell, have a fascinating way of reproducing. They split themselves into two. This process is called cell division or fission. The example is of amoeba which can divide in any direction. But wait, there is more. Some unicellular organisms have more organization in their bodies. For example, the Leishmania parasite, which causes Kala-Azar, has a whip-like structure at one end of its cell. During fission, the division occurs in a particular way related to the whip-like structure, and it cannot split in any direction. And then there are other single-celled organisms like Plasmodium, which is a parasite that causes malaria. Plasmodium divides into many daughter cells simultaneously by multiple fission. The second method of asexual reproduction is fragmentation. In simple multicellular organisms, like Spirogyra, reproduction is straightforward. They just break up into smaller pieces that grow into new individuals. This type of reproduction is called fragmentation. But unfortunately, humans cannot do the same. Our bodies are made up of various types of specialized cells that work together to form tissues, organs, and eventually a whole body. So, if we break a part of our body, it won't grow into a new person. We need more complex methods of reproduction, which we will discuss later in this chapter. Moving on, we have discussed in the beginning of this video that a starfish can regrow body parts if they are cut or broken off. This process is called regeneration, and it is carried out by specialized cells. For example, if you cut a simple animal like a hydra or planaria into many pieces, each piece can grow into a whole new organism. This is possible because the specialized cells in their bodies can divide and make new cells. These new cells can then develop into various cell types and tissues, forming a complete new organism. It's like magic. Now here is the thing, organisms like hydra do not have to be necessarily cut to reproduce. They can use another method of reproduction, that is budding. In hydra, a tiny bud forms as a result of repeated cell division at one specific site. This bud grows and develops into a complete individual and then detaches itself from the parent body to become a new individual. It's like having a little clone of yourself growing on your body and then breaking off to start a new life on its own. While animals like hydra use regenerative cells for reproduction through budding, plants have a unique ability to develop into new plants from different parts such as roots, stems, and leaves under favorable conditions. This is known as vegetative propagation and is used to grow many plants like sugarcane, roses, and grapes. An example of vegetative propagation is the propagation of a rose plant through stem cuttings. A healthy stem from a mature rose plant is carefully cut and planted in soil or a rooting medium. Over time, the cutting develops roots and grows into a new rose plant that is genetically identical to the parent plant. Plants raised by vegetative propagation can bear flowers and fruits earlier than those produced from seeds, which makes it advantageous. Moreover, this method also allows the propagation of plants that have lost the capacity to produce seeds such as banana, orange, and rose. Vegetative propagation produces plants that are genetically similar enough to the parent plant to have all its characteristics. This ensures that desirable traits of plants can be maintained over generations. The last topic of this video is spore formation. To understand it, let's take the example of bread mold. In bread mold, tiny structures called sporangia make spores that can become new molds. These spores are protected by a tough wall until they find a wet place to grow. These spores can travel long distances, and when they find favorable conditions like moisture and nutrients, they germinate and form new plants. This is like how seeds have a tough outside until they find a good place to grow. By making spores, bread mold can spread and live in new places. So to conclude, in this video we have discussed what is reproduction, importance of variation, types of reproduction, methods of asexual reproduction like fission, fragmentation, regeneration, budding, vegetative propagation, spore formation. Now we have discussed this topic with ample examples. It's time for you to practice questions. You can attempt MCQ tests provided by EduRev, and if you want to watch more videos of this chapter or read chapter notes, you can do so at EduRev.